This is the moment I knew I was going to be a witness to a murder. I had a man in my back seat, a briefcase on his lap, and a silenced pistol tucked into his waistband. He was a professional, a hitman. And the worst part? I knew exactly who his target was. It was my brother-in-law. It was a slow Tuesday night. The kind of rain that makes the city look like a cheap watercolor painting. I was parked near the financial district, hoping for one last fare before calling it a night. Then, a ping. A pickup at a high-end hotel, the kind I usually only drop people off at. I pulled up, and he got in. No fuss, no small talk, just a quiet, almost invisible man in a dark suit. He gave me an address in the old industrial park, a place where the lights are always dim and the shadows are always long. I've been driving a cab for 20 years. You develop a sixth sense for trouble. This guy wasn't drunk, he wasn't lost. He was focused, too focused. He had a briefcase chained to his wrist, and he kept his eyes on the road, but not like he was watching for directions. He was watching for threats. About 10 minutes into the ride, he shifted, and his jacket rode up. That's when I saw it, the dark metal of a pistol tucked neatly into his waistband. It wasn't a big, flashy gun. It was small, efficient, and it had a silencer screwed on to the end. My heart didn't just race. It dropped. It felt like a stone hitting the bottom of my stomach. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel, trying to look like a man who hadn't just seen a murder weapon. "Long night?" I asked, my voice coming out a little too high. He didn't look at me. "Just business," he said. His voice was calm, almost soothing. That's what made it worse. I tried to figure out my options. Pull over? Scream? Hit the emergency button? But I was alone, miles from the nearest patrol car, with a professional killer sitting 3 feet behind me. I had to play it cool. Then he gave me a direction that made the blood run cold. "Take a left at the next light, then the second right. It's a warehouse on the corner, number 412. Warehouse 412. That was the address of the small, struggling printing business owned by my wife's brother, Mark. Mark, who owed money to the wrong people. Mark, who had been dodging calls for weeks. I knew it was Mark. There was no doubt. The address, the time, the quiet professional man with the gun. Mark had gotten himself into deep trouble, and now I was driving his executioner to the scene. My mind was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I had to do something. But what? If I stopped, he'd kill me first. If I called the police, he'd hear me, and he'd kill me first. I started talking. Anything to buy time. "That area's a mess," I said, trying to sound like a helpful cabbie. "Construction. You'll be stuck in traffic for 20 minutes. There's a back way. Takes you right to the loading dock. No lights, no traffic." He paused. I could feel his eyes on the back of my head. The silence stretched, heavy, and dangerous. "Show me," he finally said. I took the detour. It was a risk, but it was the only way to change the timeline. I needed a distraction, I needed a chance. As I drove down the dark, narrow alley, I started to cough. A big, theatrical, choking cough. I reached for the water bottle on the floor, fumbling with it, making a show of being distracted. "Sorry, man, got something caught in my throat." While I was coughing, I subtly pressed the hazard button on my dashboard. It wasn't the emergency button, but the one that controls the interior light. I'd rigged it years ago. A quick double tap would flash the interior light twice, a signal to my dispatcher that I was in trouble, but couldn't talk. It was a long shot. The hitman didn't react. He was too focused on the briefcase and the address. We were 2 blocks away. I had to try something else. I remembered Mark telling me about a faulty fire alarm system at the warehouse. "You know, I picked up a guy from that warehouse last week. He was complaining about the fire alarm, said it goes off every time a truck backfires, real sensitive. The hitman finally looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Just drive. I pulled up to the warehouse. It was dark, silent, and exactly where Mark was supposed to be working late. "Here we are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He reached for the door handle. This was it. I had one last chance. I slammed the car into park, and then, with all my strength, I leaned on the horn, a long, loud, blaring blast that echoed off the metal buildings. The hitman froze. He didn't pull the gun. He just stared at me, his face a mask of cold fury. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Sorry," I yelled, trying to be startled. "My hand slipped. Damn thing is too sensitive." The horn was still blaring. The noise was deafening. Then, the lights in Warehouse 412 flickered on, and the fire alarm, just as Mark had described, started to wail, a piercing, high-pitched shriek that drowned out the horn. The hitman knew he was compromised. He couldn't risk the noise, the attention. His window of opportunity was gone. He didn't say a word. He just opened the door, threw a wad of cash onto the seat, not 10,000, but maybe 500, and disappeared into the rain. He left the briefcase. He left the gun. He just ran. I sat there, shaking, the fire alarm screaming in the background. I had saved Mark. I had risked my life, and I had a briefcase, a gun, and a story that would change everything. I never told Mark what happened. I just told him to get out of town for a few months. I called the police anonymously about the abandoned briefcase and the gun, but I kept the story vague. They never connected it to me. I still drive that cab. Every time I pass Warehouse 412, I remember the sound of that fire alarm. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the choice. I was just a cab driver, a ghost in the city. But for one night, I was the only thing standing between a killer and my family. And that's the thing about this job. You're a silent witness to people's lives, their secrets, and their desperate choices. Sometimes you just drive, and sometimes driving is the hardest choice of all. If you want to hear more stories from the dark side of the city, hit that subscribe button. You never know who I'll pick up next.